language.
No,
Doesn't
no.
matter. I'm in your hands.
I mean, I'm on record writing also that he's the worst human being on earth, or at least the worst human being in America, and we have selected him as our leader.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so I'm going to begin. Uh, Welcome to Conversations. I'm MuqtedarKhan, your host, and I have with me the distinguished diplomat from India, Ambassador Talmiz Ahmed, who has served as India's ambassador in several countries in the Gulf, including United Arab Emirates, Oman, Saudi Arabia, and some of these assignments were on multiple occasions. He is also
Mhm.
a very prominent scholar of the Middle East and a commentator. And so we are absolutely delighted to have him here, even though the occasion is rather dire. And so, without wasting too much more time on preliminaries, I will start by asking Ambassador Saab, what do you think how are you reacting to this entire Israel-Iran episode? We seem to be living in an era of wars. Unlike what Prime Minister Modi said, this is not an era of war. It appears that this is an era of multiple wars. How do you see and how do you react to Israel's attack on Iran? Will Israel achieve its objectives? Will Iran be able to have an impact on regional politics and global politics by just surviving this onslaught?
The central figure in the West Asian scenario is Prime Minister Netanyahu. And the most powerful impulse that motivates him is his personal political fortunes. He has been outstanding in terms of personal survival. He has always been able to turn a bad situation to his advantage. He has used the full might of the Israeli armed forces, bolstered bolstered very robustly by the Americans because of their commitment to Israel, and has wreaked havoc all across the region. It is overtly the domestic compulsions, the compulsions to avoid the criminal cases against him and remain prime minister, ensure that the inquiry against him with regard to failures related to 7th October are not pursued, keep his coalition together so that there is, on the basis that there is no compromise, and various other domestic matters which have come up because of the kind of coalition that he has. He has found an extraordinary opportunity to take full advantage of the American conduct. He knows American politics perfectly. He has very powerful links with all the lobbies that matter. And he knows there is no capacity in the White House, regardless of who is there. There is no capacity in the White House to ever confront him or deny him what he wants. This was true of Mr. Biden, and it is true of Mr. Trump as well. Now, there has been a posturing in this regard. There has been an indication to us that there is a certain divide between Mr. Donald Trump and Mr. Netanyahu. I never believed that. I believe that the bond is extremely deep, that there is no occasion where Donald Trump will not extend total American support to Netanyahu. Therefore, what happened? There is a lot of writing, and it has come out in the American media as well, that Netanyahu may have timed the assault on Iran to prevent the meeting that was going to take place in Muscat. And that it is very likely that the deal maker in Donald Trump, regardless of the public posturing after the Rome meeting, may have worked out some deal. And this would have been a deal that would accommodate to some extent some of Iran's interests, particularly with regard to the right to enrichment, which was there in the JCPOA. This does not suit Netanyahu. Netanyahu wants to have the maximalist advantage for himself. Any deal with Iran would not have been acceptable. And that is why this would be one reason why he would have acted in this regard. He has also played to Donald Trump's ego by bringing in that business of 60 days. And whatever may have been the personal view of Donald Trump, we will never know, because he is a person who about whom we can never be certain, because he changes his posture, public posture, like a chameleon. So we'll never know whether he was genuinely opposed to the onslaught, because as you know, a day earlier there had been a deliberate leak from the White House giving a summary of the conversation that Donald Trump had with Mr. Netanyahu, where the president was quoted in italics, absolutely vehemently opposing a military action. That should have already alerted us, and many of us didn't take that conversation seriously. We believed that there had been a green signal given to go forward. That is very likely the case. But what Netanyahu did was to bring in that business of 60 days and said, Mr. President, you gave Iran 60 days, and and they haven't delivered. I'm going to hit them on the 61st day. And Donald Trump bought that, and he was so thrilled with this thing that I gave them 60 days, and therefore they have now got a bitter lesson. It's not clear, because his own emissary was going to meet
Yes.
the Iranians on the 63rd day. So it was a meeting. Nobody took that 60 days business, not cast in stone. So that the last point I'll make to you is that there was a golden opportunity from the Netanyahu perspective. Number one, the axis of resistance had been annihilated. Iran's air defenses were very weak, if not below zero. We don't know, because Israel had told us that they have no air defenses. And in this recent assault, we have not seen any evidence of that. He had in Donald Trump a president whom he could get on board very quickly, and that has actually happened. And there were domestic compulsions as well. If there was no conflict, Netanyahu had to create one, because his coalition was totally opposed to any kind of compromise, any kind of deal, any kind of ceasefire. So this is what I would say to you in response to your question, that it is a question of domestic compulsions, the desire to emerge as a hero in from all this, build up his standing with the domestic constituency, deliver a hammer blow to the Iranians. And as you know, in the United States, there is already the Iran has been demonized so much for 45 years that there will be no tear shed for the kind of assault and barbaric assassination that have been carried out. There is also no thinking whatsoever about the medium to long term implications of this attack.
Ambassador, so there are a couple of things. For example, from the US point of view, one view is that Donald Trump was in on it for from the very beginning, and this entire discussion of having Steve Witkoff going to Muscat and Trump issuing a warning. Basically, Trump implied that if Iran on Sunday, after meeting Witkoff, would have agreed to suspending enrichment, then there would be no war. That was the indication that he was giving. But the whole idea was to lull Iran into thinking that the attack would come after the Muscat meeting, not before that. And so the US kind of helped Israel in creating a surprise for the Iranians, which led to essentially killing all the senior military officers and the scientists. But what the question that I really want to ask you is that it is very clear that while Israel has lost a lot of ground in the West, this week itself, UN was going to host a conference co-sponsored by France and Saudi Arabia, which at first had announced was to recognize the Palestinian state. Then under American pressure, they said, okay, we are not going to recognize the Palestinian state, but we are going to take steps towards recognition, which basically abandoned that goal. So there was a lot of loss of international support for Netanyahu. But Iran, isn't it amazing and surprising that while there were some condemnations from Saudi Arabia and other countries in the region, there is zero support for Iran from the so-called OIC countries and others in the Middle East. Like, how afraid are these countries of even, ruffling American feathers that they will do nothing to support uh, Iran? In fact, in last year, the Jordanian Air Force was even protecting Israel, which it is not doing this time.
I would say to you that this whole last year and a half has been the graveyard for diplomacy. Actually, we have seen that Israel enjoys total impunity. There is no crime that it cannot commit today. There is no power on earth that can reprimand Israel effectively. And I would say to you that it's a waste of time for countries to be issuing one resolution or one statement or the other. Nobody is listening to it. Nobody is bothered about it. As far as Netanyahu is concerned, he is bothered only about one person, and that is Donald Trump. He doesn't care for the European Union or the Global South or the International Court of Justice or of the UN Security Council or the General Assembly. That is very, very clear. He cares to, and he actually has understood Donald Trump. He knows Donald Trump extremely well, as he knew Biden. He knows how to play on the man's ego and get what he wants. Over actually, if you were to look at it objectively, they are truly made for each other.
That's the,
Obviously, Netanyahu may be much more cerebral, but
yeah,
in terms of political thinking,
yeah.
political ideology, dare I use this word, they are very similar. Both come from the hard right, both are authoritarian, both neither of them has much interest in democratic niceties or diplomatic niceties. Both of them love the center of power, and therefore they know each other quite well. After all, in the first term, Netanyahu was Donald Trump's best friend, and there is no reason why that should change. And Iran is a target that you can attack with total impunity as far as the West is concerned. Your question is, why isn't anyone else speaking up? What are they to do? General Assembly has passed so many resolutions calling for a ceasefire. The humanitarian scenario in Gaza is visible to us. There has been a very robust, one-sided betrayal of the ceasefire agreement. Starvation has become the weapon, and alongside starvation, random killings of 20, 30, 40 extremely famished Palestinians right in front of our eyes. None of this has mattered to anybody. I think the international community is today benumbed and incapable of any humanitarian response.
But tell me, Saab, so for example, your invocation of the starvation as a tactic that Israel is using against the Palestinians, basically to ethnically cleanse the region. They say, we're going to starve you, otherwise you're welcome to leave Gaza. But at the time when this policy was being implemented, uh, the Gulf countries were offering trillions of dollars of investments to Donald Trump, and they were facilitating him. Was that necessary? Like, what does that achieve for these countries? They don't get anything at all. So why would they commit to investing billions of dollars and shore up Donald Trump's image at home when they get none of these goals? Unless you're saying that they really don't care about Palestine and they don't really care about what is happening in their region. And all they want to do is to cozy up to America. I mean, is this the only purpose for these countries
My,
and their
my
foreign policy?
understanding is that their approach is a little more nuanced and sophisticated. They are dealing with a very erratic and unpredictable leader who has engaged with them. He prioritizes the engagement with them, but that engagement is entirely transactional. They know which buttons to press. Throughout his visit, they pandered to his ego and supported his interest in getting the and looking good in front of his constituency at home. Talked of billions of dollars, even trillions of dollars were mentioned. which you and I know have no relation with reality.
Yeah.
They wanted to ensure at this early stage of their presidency, of Donald Trump's presidency, they start out on a good note. Therefore, throughout the visit, they did not embarrass him by raising any issues that would embarrass him. He also did not raise issues relating to oil supplies. He was supposed to be talking about that. He did not talk to Saudi Arabia about normalization. Saudi Arabia did not embarrass him about raising issues about the security agreement. And, none of the serious issues that agitate the region were discussed and certainly did not figure in the public domain. So, this was, I think, a first meeting of two sides who are looking at improving ties over a period of time, not wanting to do anything at this first encounter of the second term. What is crucial about the second term, which makes it different from the first term, is that Donald Trump is a free agent. He doesn't have to worry about the next term. He's already got enough political experience. He doesn't have to look over his shoulder. He's actually very self-confident at this time. And the deliberate leaks that came in order to make our Gulf ruler look good was the fact he's not going to Israel. He's not meeting Netanyahu. What a great thing. But actually, there was a very substantial engagement already taking place between the president and Netanyahu.
Two
Netanyahu had
visits.
already been there twice. So,
Yeah.
what are we talking about that in May he didn't go to Israel? There was already a perfect arrangement. So,
Sure.
now your question is where do we go from it? I think the Gulf countries, as a result of his first term, had decided that the United States is no longer a credible security guarantor as far as the Gulf countries are concerned. Therefore, they had started talking the language of strategic autonomy, had diversified their relationship, and had started looking at countries like India, China, Russia, etc. We scholars had started putting the term strategic autonomy against their name. I think that is what they are still looking at. The message that came out that there will be a substantial transactional relationship with the Americans, anchored largely in defense purchases and economic cooperation and technology, but it will not be at the expense of the other interactions that they want to have, particularly with the Chinese, the Russians, the Indians, and many other countries in the region. Strategic, they also have conveyed that strategic concerns are not their priority just yet. They would like to focus on economic issues. Now, your question about Palestine. Left to themselves, quite possibly, left to themselves, some of the rulers would wish this whole issue away. But the Palestine issue refuses to go away. In the occupied territories, there are 6 to 7 million Palestinians living in onerous conditions. All across the Arab world, public opinion is very supportive of their concerns. Even the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, conveyed to Biden and to Blinken very robustly that I'm not going to normalize because my people will not allow me to normalize. He made this very clear and demanded actual progress towards the Palestinian cause, towards the Palestinian aspiration. So I would say there is concern, but what you are looking at is a region that is embroiled in conflict. It's an ongoing conflict. Huge casualties are taking place on a daily basis. No power on earth is capable of doing anything about this scenario except the American, and the American president has not given any indication that there is an intellectual ballast that supports his thinking, that he has any strategic vision, that he has any clear strategic direction. He appears to be so consumed with his own centrality that some of these leaders, particularly Netanyahu, are able to pander to that and get what they want for the time being. So I think that is the way I would explain that the Gulf leaders overall are also looking for a role in this confusing context. Where do they place themselves? Where do they position themselves? How do they don't want to be part of a US led alliance as they used to be earlier. But now that there are these horrendous developments taking place, where the balance of power in the region has been so fundamentally changed that these are challenges that will take time for them to understand, assimilate, discuss among themselves, and see what new approaches they can come up with. This is a challenge not just for the Gulf; it is for other countries also in different parts of the world. But certainly, the primary concern should be with the Gulf countries themselves.
Do you think that in the last 30 years, the Iranian foreign policy has done great disservice to Iranian people rather than, I feel that if after 79, if they had not got into the war with Iraq, uh, and that was because they were trying to export their revolution and the regional countries were horrified, scared, and so they used Iraq to push Iran back. If the war had not happened and they had not been in such a adversarial position with the West, Iran in the last 30, 40 years, using globalization and its natural resources, could have become a country as developed and as prosperous as some of the European countries. Don't you think so?
Professor, I disagree with your perception and your assessment and your analysis. You have given what our Western brethren have been conveying to us right from the beginning. I would like you to, instead of the camera looking at Iran from Washington, shift slightly and place yourself in Tehran. Look at the intense hostility that the Iranians have experienced from the Americans and as a result from other Western countries. Intense hostility from 1979. Okay, there is always they say that you had the embassy kidnapping of the dictators, but the story from Iran goes to 1953
53.
and talks about Mossadegh,
Yeah.
which no American seems to know about. The Americans know that their people were taken into account. The embassy was seen as a nest of spies. Iran also has a very strong feelings about its own historic legacy and its civilizational contribution and the intense sense of humiliation. The Islamic Revolution was an attempt to recover some of the dignity and honor that had been taken away. But instead of accommodating their concern, I would also disagree with you entirely. The war against Iran was entirely initiated by Iraq with the full encouragement of the Gulf monarchies
Yeah.
who funded it. And it was not an Iranian initiative whatsoever. This business of exporting the revolution, etc., you know that many things are said in the constitution by a newly set up regime. It had no capacity. Look at the state of their armed forces. They could not even, they were barely in place. The capacity to export the revolution simply wasn't there. It was an attack engineered entirely by the Iraqis. They were hoping that they would win within 3 to 6 months, capture a third of the territory, and topple the Islamic regime. That was the game plan, but instead they united the country and the war went on for 8 years. The West sustained support, gave sustained support to the Iraqis, even when they used chemical weapons. That itself had a certain impact on the Iranian psyche. The fact that they were totally alone, totally isolated. When at that time the Security Council refused to take a look at the damage that the Iraqi chemical weapons had done on them. After that, they made numerous attempts to reach out to the West. And we know the story in that regard that every time a serious attempt was made, the Israel lobby was ready to scuttle it. You know that after the occupation of Kuwait had been reversed, it is the Israel lobby that ensured that the dual containment is not just it is against Iraq and Iran. when
Yeah.
Iran had done nothing in the process. In
Yeah.
fact, Iran felt that they had supported the Americans. The Iranians supported the Americans after 9/11 and gave them a lot of valuable data with regard to the various Al Qaeda elements. You are also aware, which has now come in the public domain, that the Americans had several rounds of dialogue with the Iranians in 2002 and 2003 in the run up to the Iraq war. This was in Geneva, and some of the information is already available, but I won't name names. This was a secret discussion. Basically, the Americans were talking to the Iranians as to how to manage Iraq once the regime change had taken place. And they found the Iranians very, very accommodative and interesting. But unfortunately, once Baghdad fell, the Americans panicked and they stopped all dialogue. And of course, our American brethren, the Israel lobby, was there to ensure that this whole bogey of the nuclear weapons was started. And this is a country that has suffered extraordinary privation as a result of the onerous sanctions. So if you find that Iran is not, quote unquote, a normal country, you must look first to Washington, D.C., and second to Tel Aviv. And once you see the mischief that these two have done against the Islamic Republic, you will get a lot of answer. Even now, with regard to the last point, the nuclear agreement, may I ask you, Professor, who withdrew from the nuclear agreement? Who is the one who violated the agreement?
The
There
only,
was a
yeah.
this was an American decision at the highest level, a solemn decision. It is approved by the Security Council, and within 2 years, they are subject to the worst possible sanctions a country can go through. And you think there's something wrong with the Iranians? Please look elsewhere, Professor,
So,
right into your own neighborhood.
there are a couple of points I wanted to make. I actually had lunch with Martin Indyk, who was the author of the dual containment article in Foreign
You are
Affairs.
aware of that. A
Yes. So,
hardcore Zionist.
yeah. So I asked him, I asked him about that idea, and he was very frank. He said, Muqtada, I was worried that at the end of the Iran-Iraq war, Saddam Hussein had been delegitimized and Iraq had been weakened. Uh, he was genuinely worried that some people in the US establishment would start leaning towards Iran as a way to use Iran to contain Saddam Hussein.
In
So,
those days, Professor, you know,
yeah.
these neocons believed that Israel's interests are more important than American
So
interests.
that is true
And
even
they
today.
convinced the Bush presidency that the Israeli interests and the American interests are identical. And
Uh,
that is what you know about the
yes, yes,
neocons,
yes. I agree.
particularly in the first
I mean,
term.
that is true even
He was
today.
an architect of many of these
Yeah,
policies that harmed American interests and
yeah.
have harmed West Asia.
I mean, there is a interview by Steve Witkoff in which he said that he was supporting both the Democrats and the Republicans, but he leaned more towards Trump because he considered Trump as more Israel friendly. He said it very clearly. It's you can people can Google that article maybe before I.
I'm familiar with him. I've had a conversation with him. He had the ill fortune of once sitting next to me. He had no clue who I am. He made some innocuous question, and I gave him such a robust answer that he was shaken and he was wondering, he was whispering to others, who is this guy?
Yeah, but see, I mean, there is no doubt about that. And for some of the audience who don't know what you were referring to with Mossadegh, in 1953, the United States, using CIA, hired over 10,000 actors apparently to orchestrate a revolution inside Iran and essentially replaced a democratically elected prime minister of Iran, Mossadegh, who had threatened to nationalize the oil resources of Iran, and he was replaced with monarchy. Iran had its first constitutional revolution in 1908. So Iran was already democratic in 1908 and subsequently. So what the US did was to replace a democracy with a monarchy by installing the Shah.
We also have literature now that after independence, after 1947, the Americans were quite keen to get rid of Nehru and put in someone else in his place. And it just happened that that person who was their candidate passed away in a set of circumstances and Nehru could not be elbowed out. But the
Yes,
literature is very clear
very
on
clear.
this.
Yeah, that is very true. Like, for example, Colin Powell, when he became Secretary of State, his first visit was to South Africa, where he talked about democracy. And then as he came north and reached the Middle East, he kept talking about stability, 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 and not democracy. I mean, imagine a situation where you would have, if you had an elected prime minister of Saudi Arabia today, Saudi Arabia's foreign policy would be so different, fundamentally different, because the Saudi leader would have to continuously balance public opinion with his particular posture, etc. So, yes, unfortunately, rather than promoting democracy, the United States has been the
Our
big.
American brethren also disliked traditional leaders who happened to be nationalistic. And some of the changes with regard to succession were attempted to ensure nationalist leaders, because nationalist leaders have one serious problem. They value the interests of their own country over those of Western countries. That's the crime as far as the West is concerned. An attempt was made. In fact, I was there in Saudi Arabia and I know a lot at first hand that they were very uncomfortable about then Prince Abdullah bin Abdulaziz and wanted someone else to be the ruler. And there was a major attempt made to see whether the other person could be shown as older to Prince Abdullah. But of course, he was the crown prince and finally became the ruler because he was a nationalist. It was felt that he is tribal, he is not modern, doesn't speak English, and therefore he is likely to be much more committed to his own country. So if we know all these things, West Asia has been damaged severely due to Western interventions.
This is my last question, Ambassador Saab, and you have given me a lot of your time and your wisdom, so I'm extremely grateful for that. My question is that you must have seen Prime Minister Modi's tweet, basically that both the countries are our friends, and so India is again not going to play any role at all. The reluctance to play a mediator's role, the reluctance to play some kind of what I don't understand is why hasn't somebody explained to Dr. Jaishankar that there is a concept called shuttle diplomacy? Both the Israelis as well as the Iranians trust India more than any other country in the world. And so this is such a great opportunity for India to claim to be what they want to be, Vishwa Gurus and the leader of the global South and the voice of the global South. Why is India so passive with regards to the Middle
May
East?
I explain to you, Professor, as my understanding,
Sure.
without polemics, the most important project that animates our country today and the top leadership is the reworking of the idea of India and to create a new idea of India, an idea of India that they believe should have been in place in 1947, but for various reasons, the country was deprived of that ideology, that vision, that wisdom. There is a view that today we have an ideal situation with a leader who is extremely dynamic, extremely visionary, totally committed, that what the RSS could not achieve in a century, he will be able to achieve during his tenure. This is the priority. Nothing else matters. For the rest, to the extent that foreign policy is important, it is important to ensure that the persona of the top leadership is enhanced in the eyes of the constituency at home. That is the other part. I don't think with this background, the government is particularly bothered about playing a larger than life lead role in promoting peace and stability. Our approach remains what it has been for several years, and that is bilateral and transactional. We would like to have good ties with all of the countries concerned. They are important to us for our energy security, for our trade, for our investments, for our joint ventures, and for the employment of our people. They can also facilitate connectivity projects, but don't ask us to get involved with political issues, security issues, diplomatic issues that are outside our remit. We do have a strategic partnership with all the countries of the region. But each of these partnerships is bilateral. Now, there has been a small change, and it's my duty to mention it. Last year, in the month of October, the External Affairs Minister of India had a joint meeting with the six foreign ministers of the Gulf Cooperation Council, and an action plan for this cooperation to go forward was agreed to. It for 4 years. It's a 4 year action plan. It is overwhelming in terms of the public document. It is overwhelmingly economic in character, but there is some reference to security, etc. So I would say there is a paper that has already been finalized, but in the last 8 months, 9 months, I have not seen any attempt to give it any shape or character. Possibly because the region is aflame, because the region is in such extraordinary turmoil that you can't pursue new ideas when you have so much happening and so much uncertainty. Uncertainty in Washington, uncertainty in Tel Aviv, in Tehran. What do we do in this region of murder and mayhem? So I think that there is a thought. I don't know how serious it is. I don't, but I will not. I would like to reserve judgment till we have a slightly better scenario in the region of some degree of stability, some degree of clarity with where we could be going. We don't know. Possibly, for example, the assault upon Iran has extraordinary implications. Much will depend on how it is concluded and what is the shape of the region after it is concluded. So I would just say that perhaps you and I can meet again after 3 months and you could quiz me as to what has happened in that period. But as of now, I can't give you greater clarity because it doesn't exist as of now.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. I wish you all the best.
Yeah.